Have you ever wondered why the absolute smartest people you know often have the hardest time just being fully present in a room? Well, let's dive right into this incredibly moving explainer on how we build these massive intellectual fortresses to protect ourselves from the vulnerability of love. Today, we're exploring a breathtaking collection of literary variations centered around a man named David and his lifelong project of basically out-architecting his own heart.
We're going to kick things off with a piercing question from a wise, mythical coyote, a trickster figure from the source texts who instantly cuts through all our cognitive armor to ask what we are truly hiding. You know, Coyote points out that we spend so much energy defending our walls, but intimacy? Intimacy isn't interested in walls. It's looking for the flinch. We build these elaborate defenses to hide the parts of us that shrink away, mistakenly thinking the defense itself is our personality.
So let's get into it. Part 1, the architecture of abandonment, building the fortress.
To really understand this fortress, we first need to meet our subject, David. It's kind of ironic. His very name means beloved, but he feels so unworthy of it that he constructs this massive defensive architecture. He feels like a joke God told and forgot to finish, right? Walking around in this king-sized, poet-sized name that he's constantly apologizing for. And because he's so sure he's fundamentally flawed, he builds an intellectual fortress to make absolutely sure no one can ever get close enough to find out. But the foundation of this fortress isn't random. It's deeply rooted in early trauma that taught him presence is provisional and loss is unavoidable. At just 16 months old, way before he even has the language to narrate it, David experiences separation from his birth parents. Then, at age 9, the devastating death of his adoptive mother arrives as a second collapse. Think about that for a second. His nervous system didn't write a story about this, it recorded a condition. It taught him that the people you depend on can simply cease to be available, with zero warning. From that point forward, his goal was never to avoid loss, because loss was already a given. His goal was to avoid ever being surprised by it again.
And the result of that trauma is this anticipatory withdrawal, where he uses his high intelligence to leave relationships internally long before anyone actually departs. The text calls this presence bankruptcy. And honestly, you probably know someone exactly like this. The chair holds the shape of a person who showed up, but their attention checked out an hour ago. David is a total virtuoso at this. Because in his mind, if you leave first, even by a half second in your own head, you were never really left, right? It's a tragic but brilliantly efficient kind of emotional triage.
Which brings us to part 2, meet the guard dog, guarding the gate. To protect his fragile inner self, David's ego manifests as a literal guard dog wearing this little tin crown. And look, this dog isn't a villain. It's simply the grasping at a self, an ego mechanism doing exactly what it thinks it must do to keep David safe from the absolute terror of exposure. It stands at the gate of intimacy, firmly believing that if anyone gets inside, David will be destroyed. So the guard dog uses these highly specific tactics to convert emotional vulnerability into intellectual mastery, basically numbing the wound before it can even be inflicted. It barks at intimacy and real questions. It meticulously files all of David's unanalyzed feelings and shame into a giant filing cabinet drawer labeled miscellaneous. It literally turns the mirror to face the wall so David never has to confront his own reflection. And perhaps most effectively of all, it employs what we'll call the load-bearing shrug. It's that classic attitude of, who cares, big deal, administered like emotional Novocaine to preemptively numb any potential hurt.
But using a bit of Socratic inquiry here, we really have to ask ourselves, what exactly is the guard dog protecting? Like, what would we actually see if we finally looked? David has paid the invoices for this architecture for 40 years, entirely convinced that behind the mirror lies complete wreckage. He truly believes there is a fundamental, broken flaw that must be kept from public view at all costs. But what if he's wrong?
All right, part 3, Love at the Fortress, the uninvited weather.
At this major turning point, a character simply named Love arrives at the gate, and Love doesn't act the way David expects. Whether acting as a noir detective cracking a cold case in a rainy office, or a Buddhist teacher pointing out the vastness of the sky, Love doesn't try to out-argue the guard dog, it just waits. Love doesn't bring a better philosophical framework or a sharper lens to debate the ego. It simply exists, kind of like the weather. You don't invite it in, you just suddenly notice the room has gotten warmer. Love understands that you simply cannot out-architect a wound.
And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. This massive, intimidating architecture of distance was actually just a desperate plea for connection. To say, I can't stand to be loved, was never armor at all. It was the loudest scream in the building. All of David's cynical distance, all those brilliant essays he wrote to stay 3 steps ahead of everyone else, they were never the truth talking. It was a scream wearing the costume of indifference, begging to be loved in the very limited language his shame would actually let through the gate. Moving into part 4, the door was unlocked. The punchline.
We reach the climax of David's journey through this awesome lens of absurdist theater and strange loops. This is where the heavy drama of the fortress suddenly reveals its own absurdity. It's just like an Escher drawing of 2 hands drawing each other. The ego generates the exact fear it is guarding against, and the only way out is to step 1 level up and recognize the loop. You draw a distinction that you are unlovable, and then you build a fortress to guard that boundary. It's a completely self-fulfilling tangled hierarchy, and you can't break the loop from inside the loop. You don't need a bigger proof that you are loved. You need to step up 1 floor to see that the system itself is the very thing trapping you.
0. That is the exact number of locks on the fortress door. The guard dog's only real job was to stand so menacingly close to it that nobody ever bothered to check the handle. I mean, think about that. 40 years of high-level intellectual defense mechanisms, 40 years of filing cabinets and observation decks, and the door didn't even have a lock on it. The danger was always just the guarding itself.
When the mind finally sees this absurdity, that the door was open the whole time, it doesn't react with some triumphant philosophical breakthrough. It reacts with a gentle, involuntary laugh. A sudden giggle, duh. This is the sound awareness makes when it discovers, gently and without insult, that it was never actually lost. It's the sound of the mind realizing it built a massive, intricate machine to solve a problem that vanished the second it was directly looked at.
Finally, part 5. Stepping into the kitchen. The reality of presence.
Taking all this high-level theory into real, everyday life, David realizes he has spent his time being the library for everyone else while avoiding the exposed, unpredictable reality of the kitchen. Because, look, recognizing the door is unlocked doesn't mean anything if you don't actually walk out of the room. The library is safe. You can examine objects without touching them. You can be the smart guy in the room who has all the answers because you are controlling the variables. But the kitchen? The kitchen is governed by messy human needs. You cannot analyze your way out of a burnt dinner or a child's fever. To be in the kitchen means to be unmediated and completely exposed.
By finally sitting on the kitchen floor with his daughter without analyzing the moment or turning it into an essay, he steps out of his armor and achieves true, unmediated presence. He doesn't try to find the structural meaning in the moment. He doesn't stay 3 sentences ahead. He just sits there. The truth is found in simply letting the leg go numb, in existing without needing to define, archive, or defend the experience.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder as you look at your own defensive architecture today. Think about the intellectual walls you build at work, with your family, or in your relationships. Are you guarding an empty room? Are you avoiding the kitchen just to stay safe in your library? Take a moment today to walk up to your own fortress door and check the handle. You might just find it's been open from the inside this entire time.